All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. So we're down to four teams remaining in this 12-team college football playoff. And so far, the only thing to really do is expect the unexpected. So in round one, all four of the home teams won on the on-campus site games. And then the four teams that had a bye in round one all lost this week in their respective bowl games. And of course, that's only going to bring into question more things that were already on the table when this 12-team playoff format was created. Now, one question that people are talking about: should the four highest ranking, excuse me, conference champions continue to get first round buys? And for me, I'm going to say no. And I know I'm going to touch on this again, but nonetheless, I'm going to say no for right now. And the reason is I feel like each conference and each conference schedule are not created equal. Okay. Especially in this era of mega conferences where everybody does not even play or they don't even come close to playing everyone in their own respective leagues. And I mean, just to give you an idea of this, the Big Ten got four teams into this playoff, and they still have two teams remaining: Ohio State and Penn State. But with the exception of Ohio State, nobody, in the Big Ten, played, more than two of these teams that are in the playoff right now. You think about it, okay, Oregon played Ohio State. I'm not talking about the conference championship game. I'm just talking about the regular season. Ohio State was the only one that played both Oregon and Penn State. Okay, and they went to both. They were on the road for both of those games. You know what I'm saying? But for the most part, we're not seeing a lot of it. But for me, I feel like the seeding with taking the conference champions, getting the first four buys out of the equation, I would have said Oregon still at number one, Notre Dame at number two, Georgia at three, Penn State at four, Texas at five, Ohio State at six, Tennessee at seven, Boise at eight, Indiana at nine, Arizona State at 10, Clemson at 11, and then SMU at 12. So in this perceived bracket, round one would have, seen SMU take on Texas, and of course, a trip down memory lane there from these two teams that used to play in the old Southwest Conference together. Clemson traveling to Columbus to take on Ohio State, so they still would have been at a disadvantage. Arizona State going to Knoxville to face Tennessee, which could have made for a very interesting game, and then Indiana having to go to the Smurf turf to face Boise. So your first round buys, would have been Oregon, Notre Dame, Georgia, and Penn State. Oregon still gets the Rose Bowl, Notre Dame to the Fiesta. Georgia would still be in New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl, and then Penn State would have been in Atlanta for the Peach Bowl. So you could have had potentially in round two Penn State and Texas in Atlanta for the Peach Bowl. Could have possibly had Ohio State, Georgia in New Orleans, Arizona, the Arizona State Tennessee winner facing Notre Dame and Glendale, and just thinking about Arizona uh, basically going home, to their home state for that game. That would have been huge. And then, of course, Penn State being in the Sugar Bowl. I talked about that. I talked about Georgia, and I talked about Notre Dame, and then Oregon getting the winner of Boise or Indiana in the Rose Bowl. But nonetheless, you look at what happened this year. And obviously, it didn't play out like that. All four teams that got a first round bye were one and done. And I think that they were one and done for different reasons. First and foremost, Ohio State was not, and I'm not even, I'm just going to exclude what we've seen so far from them in this tournament. Ohio State was not the eighth best team coming into this tournament. Okay. And when you think about that, Ohio State was seeded way too low. Okay. And if you're Oregon and you got them, to me, I think you're at a huge disadvantage right there because if you're the Buckeyes, these two teams did face off earlier this season, a 1 point win by the Ducks in Eugene. But if you're Ohio State, you got to take a lot of confidence out of that game because you're like, wait a minute, we basically gave them that game. And we saw what happened with Ohio State clicking on all cylinders in that game. Georgia totally different. We don't know what could have been with the Bulldogs, being that they were without their quarterback Carson Beck. You think about Boise State; they've been the giant killer, as a program for quite some time. But nonetheless, Penn State was and is the better team. Okay, and it showed this past week in the Fiesta Bowl. And in my opinion, Arizona State got hosed in that game because I feel like if that targeting call on Michael Taft had been called properly, we're probably talking about the Sun Devils getting ready to take on the Buckeyes in the Cotton Bowl. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, you can't really hide in this tournament because you're going to have to face these teams eventually. And another question is going to be, and it's been brought up this week, will the format of this playoff be tweaked soon? And only if the vote is unanimous. And I do not see that happening, to have something altered when the big boys at the table are trying to get them out all together. So the 12-team playoff is extremely exciting. I thought the 14 playoff was exciting. Honestly, I thought the BCS was exciting. Even going back pre BCS, I still thought it was exciting. But nonetheless, I still believe college football is one of the best things going. But that doesn't mean that we can't get some tweaking. I think this playoff tournament, this 12-team playoff tournament, has been a very exciting. I also think that it's experimental because I think the power brokers are sitting back and seeing how this thing plays out. And it's not going to be a one off saying, hey, based on what happened this year, we've got to change things. I think it's going to happen, a couple of years down the pike. And then, of course, pretty soon it's going to be introduced where only the top two teams get a first round bye when this thing goes to 14 teams. So, unless you have a scenario where each and every year for the next 2 or 3 years, at least three of those teams that get first round buys for this playoff are going to be one and done. Then I think they're going to sit back and talk about altering this format. But until that happens, expect to continue to see what you're getting because nonetheless, this brings with it a lot of excitement. But let's not forget when it came to the college football quarterfinals this week, every or three out of the four teams that had the first round buys were underdogs in their respective games. I think Ohio State was a 6 point favorite, maybe 6.5 over Oregon when they took the field. Penn State was a double digit favorite over Boise. Texas was a double digit favorite over Arizona State. Georgia was the only team that was a favorite, and they were a slight favorite. I think a point and a half, maybe 2 points over Notre Dame. And for the most part, it really, played out on the field. So at the end of the day, let's see how things continue to go. Even with that said, getting back to Ohio State, like I said the other night when they beat Oregon, I said it, after the Tennessee game, I said it when the field of 12 was announced. Ohio State was not the eighth best team in this tournament. They got seeded way too low, and it's showing so far in this tournament. I mean, you just look at the Cotton Bowl for next week. The Buckeyes are big time favorites over Texas, in spite of the fact that Texas, was flirting with being the number one seed in this tournament at one point. And on top of that, the game is in the great state of Texas as well. So that just gives you an idea of how dangerous that the Buckeyes can be. But nonetheless, I don't expect a lot of tweaking to come from this format, for at least a couple of more years. Let's see how it plays out over a body of work, if you will, as far as how things go with the teams that get first round buys and their success rate. But nonetheless, if you wanted excitement, this 12-team playoff in college football has provided that and then some. We still got 3 games to go. We got the semis coming up this coming week, as well as the national championship game in about 15 days, maybe 20 days, give or take. But nonetheless, plenty of excitement on the gridiron, and it ain't going away for the CFP. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off. I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.